All right, so we're almost at about half the total registration number. So let's get started with some intros. This is recorded. So if you miss anything, you can always request the recording from us at admissions. Welcome to our online open house for graduate study. Today we are focusing this session on the MFA in graphic design. My name is Molly Pettingill. You guys all know me by now. Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment. And with us, we have helping out with the chat and answering questions, Antonio Peters, also Associate Director of Admissions in my office as well. And Bethany, introduce yourself. Anyone introduce the program?
Hey there, I'm Bethany Johns. I'm the grad program director in graphic design, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we're going to do, I think you said something like a 40-minute presentation, and then we'll have time to answer some questions, but we'll try to answer some questions. Antonio and I will be answering some questions behind the scenes. We'll hide our screen, Bethany, so you can have the spotlight. And off we go.
It's appropriate. I'm starting with the theater downtown. Okay, I'll get started. Yeah, I have a presentation because I anticipate a lot of the questions that come our way about the program. So hopefully I'll cover a lot of stuff in this talk, but we have time afterwards. So welcome to Providence, which is a wonderful little funky town. We are in the downtown area, right down the street from that theater at the CIT building. That's us up there on the 5th floor, Graphic Design Studio. I'm just going to talk about the fact that we have a 2-year and a 3-year track towards an MFA in graphic design. And you guys probably all know that, and we'll have questions about them. But to start with the 3-year track, it's meant to build formal and conceptual skills in a kind of core sequence of rigorous design studios, which are, for the first year, grad type 1, 2, and 3, grad form 1 and 2, grad type design, and the history of graphic design. So just starting off with some representative work from like grad type 1 can go through playful experiments finding type in the environment to sort of more structural and conceptual compositions using type, into longer form text formats and typographic systems, which then gets continued further in type 2. Form 1 is that. I mean, it really is dealing intensively with 2D pattern design and other formats into 3D folded photographic, sculptural, etc. The history of graphic design is a course that teaches many histories packed into one. We're actually fleshing out the histories of graphic design in our curriculum as well. But one of the outcomes is this timeline that students do that kind of conflate or bring together two very different designers into a printed piece. Grad Form 2 proceeds into wild experimentation with tools and moving into digital formats, 3D, analog, etc. This was an interesting project where they had to do 145 variations of rocks, and I think this one was a self-portrait in pattern. And in the background, you see the Slobodas there, Chris and Kathleen Sloboda, who teach Grad Form 2, and also a hugely popular elective called Newly Formed. And behind them, you see a bunch of Ease, which is the inception of the type design class with Cyrus Highsmith. By the end of the type design class, you come out with a fully formed bespoke font of your own. It's just an example. At the end of the first year of the 3-year program, we have a faculty review that spreads out all the work that you've done for the first year in a kind of celebration of form, but also to look for patterns of thought and making over the course of the year. It's just an explosion of visual splendor and really actually very fun to look at. At the same time that you are both the 2-year and 3-year people have entered, you're together in a critical issues in graphic design seminar. So that's really meant to have everybody start their time at RISD together and to honor all the points of entry into graduate study. It also builds a sense of context for critical thought and practice across the discipline. It's a really great way for incoming three-year people who have areas of expertise that are non-design expertise and bodies of knowledge to come into contact with practicing designers and other people with BFAs and so forth in that. So Grad Studio 1, called Graphic Response, merges three-year track students in their second year in the fall with the new incoming class of that year's two-year track. So it's yet another remix of a cohort. And it also mixes together these varying skills and interests and talents and experience of the whole group. And in the grad studios, the curriculum sort of opens up. There are common design briefs, but everybody comes to them differently. So they really provoke the individual exploration of content across varied graphic forms. Grad Studio 1 starts with a common project, which is, or it has been doing, and I think will continue. It's an atlas, a collaborative atlas where everybody designs 16 pages. It's a fairly short project that sends people out into Providence and the environment to really probe the notion of place and self and time. Once we have all of the 16 pages, we do a wild session of sequencing them, including looking at the whole thing across the floor, and then it results in a bound print-on-demand book. This was a couple of years ago, in the presence of the previous years. And the one for this year is off at Mixam right now, so I don't have that. During the COVID period, and I'm glad that's in our rearview mirror, we had to move online for the Atlas project, and we sent pairs of students off into the great outdoors to explore different neighborhoods. And in this case, it was a neighborhood that includes an absolutely beautiful graveyard called Swan Point Cemetery. And Lewis decided to go on walks through there and gather the language on the tombstones and create this kind of processing piece that reflected that language and the pathways. Another Grad Studio 1 project, if we think about Grad Studio being a kind of encounter with primary research of primary sources, this goes to the public library's special collections, where there's an array of objects. People choose one then to do a formal and conceptual analysis of. This is this amazing elephant folio Piranesi Trajan's Column book. Those interpretations all come together in a set of 6x9 plates that everybody does, which are wildly various, that interpret those objects. This one from this year was cuneiform, which it's remarkable. You actually get to put your hands on that object from literally thousands of years ago and interpret it through different lenses. Just an example of how that project leads to a longer project. Zoe Pulley had used a Samel band, which is a bound together collection of abolition and slavery era pamphlets to sort of tease out different aspects of them, and had learned that some of those pieces had been actually printed on archivally stable fabrics, which led her to do her 10 plates as fabric pieces, and then expand that into a series of banners, which she actually managed to produce and then hang in this passageway on the campus that leads from Market Square, where the actual slave trade in Providence did take place, up through this stairwell, and then on upward into Benefit Street, which is where the wealthy likely slave owners tended to live. So it was a really fully realized project close to her heart that came out of that initial research. Another example of someone who really leapt really far away from that original object is this book of samples of wood sections that are cut 3 different ways, really kind of a remarkable collection of things. And Min Rung researched the many ways that measurement could describe that American Woods set of volumes, using 3 cuts of each specimen as a key to showing 3 kinds of information. And then when she was invited to make a longer project inspired by that research, she wanted to make a book that would function as a 3D data visualization, using all aspects and edges of the book to tell a story through its material qualities and its sequence through time. So she completely departed from the original subject matter to focus on a timeline of wars. And then she developed systems of measurement to tell the story of wars through time, which you see here, 1 year equals 2 pages. The size of the circle equaled the magnitude of fatalities. So for example, World War II was relatively fewer pages, but had massive fatalities, a larger circle, where many other wars in the world last for decades, spanning many more pages, but with fewer fatalities per year, each page with a smaller circle. So even now, this is resonant, obviously, in the state of the world. Grad Studio 2 continues in the spring, for now called Modes of Discourse. And it sort of begins where the fall studio left off, building the designer's understanding of sequence, rhetoric, and metaphor. And the course continues to culture the interpretive and narrative skills that designers need to communicate across multiple methods and modes, hence the name. So just to show an example of how that Grad Studio 1 work sort of led to a longer self-initiated project, Jeffrey, who was from California, had originally chosen this history of California from 1759, written by people who had never been there, and it was purely speculative and pretended to be the real deal. He is also someone who he came to the 3-year program as an architect and was really interested in cities. So he had his own collection of street atlases and so forth, and other kinds of maps from Los Angeles, his hometown. And his interpretation went into the realm of disputed territories. How do we know where one border starts and another one ends? Which led to a longer form project where he came up with a speculative museum of territorial disputes in various areas of the world. And you see the date on this. I'm showing you some old work just because these issues in the social context sort of persist. And so the work is not only showing that, but also the fact that these particular pieces are playing out parts of the curriculum. Part of that project too was a tileable, reprintable map, so that when things did shift and change, it could easily swap out. And ultimately, it was also the moment where the Occupy movement was happening. And because so much of the spaces that were occupied were actually corporate parks due to the lack of public space, he decided to adopt the form of the brand guideline, to do a style guide, to make a sort of Occupy Everywhere word mark. The way that he did this was to provide the narrative, to derive the particular site's footprint out of the map of that particular city. So all of the sites for all of the cities that were having the Occupy movement active at the time. This is actually the footprint of the Providence Park, which became part of this larger vocabulary of footprints that were abstracted forms representing each of those places. He combined them all into this Occupy Everywhere Uber mark, which could pull forward the individual footprint of each of those places out of that field of togetherness. And in a strange way, kind of quotes the suprematist Malevich Russian revolutionary aesthetic at the same time. It also accounted for people uploading digital documentation, social media images from the sites, which could be downloaded, put together with the Occupy symbol to make these recombinant posters, where even though it says Occupy Providence, in the image, it's Occupy Orlando, and just kind of bringing together the notion that everything was happening everywhere at once in a state of unity. So Grad Studios 1 and 2 core courses are also complemented by electives in graphic design in our department, which has a robust listing, together with Graduate Studies Commons interdisciplinary studio and seminar courses, digital plus media research clusters, or other cross-listed courses from other disciplines and formal practices. I would urge people who are looking into RISD to also appreciate the courses offered in these master's programs, which are non-studio disciplines: nature, culture, and sustainability studies, theory and history of art and design, global arts and cultures, and the teaching and learning in art and design MA, which actually offers courses leading to a certificate even for studio people, which is a valuable thing if you want to go on and teach. We have a devoted GD grad elective just for graphic design grads every fall. The last 3 have been about variable type with Kelsey Elder, source, the many meanings of that word, taught by Eric Lee, and at current time, data narratives with Ruben Fischerbaum, who actually does all of the data visualizing for the data narratives for the Washington Post. So it's really a way for people to dig into a particular skill to expand their skill set at a grad level. There's also the spring open GD electives. I mentioned newly formed before. They actually have their own Insta channel that you can tune into and look at all kinds of samples of work from that class. Then there are I can't tell if you guys can see this or whether my picture is in the way, but it's cross-disciplinary electives like digital materiality, which is offered by the textiles program, which we incidentally share here on the graduate floor of the fifth floor. There are also independent projects and collaborations that happen within courses, but also on the edges of them. This was a conversation between 2 people who grew up where water surrounds them, one person in New Orleans and one person in Iceland, and they created a publication and a whole installation and all manner of things. So there's many opportunities to work together on work. So a 5-week session separates our semesters. It's called winter session, and it's meant to be a time to take courses outside of your major, but you can also teach. You can propose independent, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. It's a time to take courses outside your major or to propose independent projects that allow you to work at your own pace. And grads can also teach from introductory type and graphic design courses that we offer every year through the department to devising an experimental course of your own making, which goes through a winter session committee. And it's a really great way for grads to grab a hold of creating their own course. Just a few examples of like winter session allows you to get off the computer if you want. This was somebody who decided to go outside and make wind drawings using various sites and locales to capture the ocean state's prevalent winds here, and just started creating marks without really a sense of where he was going with this, but was also taking emerging digital through digital plus media and began to capture live data with which he could generate wind drawings, both in a mimic of analog, but also with plotting live data. Another person decided to learn how to do UI UX and brought to it, this is actually Lewis who did the graveyard tour, created a dream journal, which is actually a really beautiful idea. And I would use this if I could, if it were real. He just needs funding, but it's completely workable about capturing themes. It's a kind of diaristic and calendar and mood recorder. So the fact that he learned all of this in winter session is the point. Ben Denzer is somebody who you should check out, but he really went down to our CoWorks makerspace and began to think about time as money, time is money as a theme, and created these incredible compositions using dollar bills and our digital embroidery stuff. I would totally suggest you check out his RISD MFA thesis opening on his website, which shows a larger than life thesis book being unfurled. Grad Seminar 2 in the spring semester parallels Grad Studio 2. And in that semester, which is different than the first semester, you begin to really dig in and establish thesis territories that are emerging out of your formal explorations, your research, and your writing. The results are compiled into a thesis compendium, which kind of captures that initial thesis research. Some design a printed book, some use web, some use both forms. This is a sample from Kit, who did web only, just because it was germane to their thesis notion of the internet. And this actually is creating its own user log based on the user attentions as the text is being read. Then in the final year, you enter thesis 1 and 2. So the way that we describe the thesis at RISD is a consistent approach to persistent ideas. It's a line of inquiry that goes across multiple forms, building a thesis body of work. It's not a single culminating like capstone project. It's really a kind of amalgam of various approaches that keep getting at similar ideas. So the thesis process advances the seminar's foundational work through visual form and critical writing in the final year's studio courses, thesis 1 in the fall and thesis 2 in the spring. Thesis 1 in the fall, something we ask everyone to do is to give a presentation in the fall that sort of sets them on their path. So I'm just going to play a brief excerpt of Kit's recorded presentation, and I'll be scrubbing forward here on it for a minute.
Hey everybody, my name's Kit Sun Lee, and welcome to my crib, the internet. Let's take a look at what the internet looks like.
Right, so this is where I scrub forward madly to get you to the point back here, which is right about here.
If malware is malicious for its ability to control your devices and access your data against your will, contemporary digital existence is malware. Antagonism is both a condition of and approach to the network systems in which we are embroiled. How do we identify the threat actors? How do we lean into our emotional, personal, and system vulnerabilities to be hostile right back? How can I design adversarial interfaces and experiences where interactions become tools for thought? To this end, I'm beginning an inquiry into what I'm calling benware. Benware meaning benignant or even benevolent software. See, it's a malware symbol, but it's modified so it looks like two people shaking hands or a smiley face. Some benware projects I have coming up include DLC, or distance learning chalking, which is a computationally generated glyph system based on war chalking that helps students find open Wi-Fi access nodes. And there's also Fracture-Lite, that's a variable font illustrating the interpolation between 2014's Gamergate and online gamer spaces in general with the rise of QAnon and the alt-right. Benware is designed as virus. It promises convenience, novelty, play, all the benefits of its host. It exploits the vulnerabilities in everyday interaction to annoy, to break things. It's a poltergeist, the friendly ghost in your computing machine that proves to you that spirits exist so you know to watch for them. It does these little harms in the manner of a vaccine, in service of alerting the social body to the threat of its structure. So, like you can get your flu shot at CVS, I'm opening up my non-FDA approved internet pharmacy at this link. If you'd like to install some benware on your device, you can download the Chrome extension I used today, along with this icon set over there. Thanks.
At the end of the fall semester, there's also a review of the work done, and so some are screen-based, others create a spatial installation of work. In this case, Farouk examining her hometown of Tehran and the way that the names have been switched out from their originals for street names, etc. Another project is the Tide Machine by Leanne Fumerton Liu, which actually is a little bit like Kit's Chrome plugin. This is actually something, it's a tool that you can use. You can actually order this, and I would recommend it. It is an incredible screensaver that is drawing on the ocean tide stations across the world, and actually reflects live time and measurement for when low tide and high tide is. So it's a little like having something alive happening in front of your eyes. Excuse me, thesis 1 and 2 span the final year of the program. However, the thesis takes on its body through all the work you do, including other electives and independent projects. The support for doing this is really scaffolded with a team of thesis advisors. And then there's also external critics that guide critical thesis dialogue throughout the year, dropping in periodically, along with the course, faculty who are teaching the thesis course. And all of this culminates in the final MFA thesis reviews, which again is everybody's chance to really show all the work they've done with their thesis. It takes place in the Koffler Gallery downstairs in CIT, which is a wonderful resource. We set up for a couple of days and kind of migrate from person to person, admiring and having critical dialogue around the work. Everybody finds a different way to articulate their thesis within the space, to sometimes enact it. This had a kind of print on demand feature to it. And it's really a kind of a fantastic array. The final expressions of the thesis are when it goes public, both in the form of the thesis book and in a group exhibition. Our graphic design grads collaborate on the concept and design of their part of the 19-discipline RISD MFA grad show. It may, in fact, be more than 19 disciplines that have grad programs now, counting the MAs. In any case, it takes place in the convention center. And I'm just going to show an array of very different approaches, since it's the exact same design problem every single time. This group decided that they would create a multiple that was everything. It was the show. And it's situated in space just to demonstrate the many ways that graphic design is published, distributed, displayed, circulated, etc. And inside the publication was the show, actually. Everybody's work and writing appearing, as well as posters that would open out of this print-on-demand item. At that point, everybody was also making their own websites to reflect their particular grad shows. And up until 2020, we did that. So when we get a little further, actually, I think I have the URL over there. You can actually go back in and look at these things. I believe that they're still live, and really explore through time what the students have been doing. 2013, they decided that they wanted to lean into the big box flavor of the convention center, and really took that as their theme to create a shop, a pop-up shop that would happen inside. While Morcos, who now has his own firm called Morcos Key in New York, did a type design for it, which became used throughout, including for the labels on the boxes, where people would edition graphic work, have extras in the boxes, and then things would be sold there on site. And everybody pitched in, from making the signage, installation, kind of a delirious box construction day. And then finally, the space was part of this big contiguous open plan at the convention center. The opening night was a frenzy of buying, and there was a lot of things for sale. It continues, that show continues into graduation. And so a lot of the families just end up going there afterwards, which continued that. So among all these books and other objects for sale, this book kept showing up, and it turns out that it was the catalog of the exhibition. So the name of this whole thing was called Shop Show. So they toggled between the two aspects of design as a kind of commercial activity and design as a white cube pursuit. They restaged all of that same work into the Koffler Gallery downstairs, situating it in space, and creating a checklist in the back of everybody's work. But it turned out that that entire book was a farce. It had all been digitally produced. However, you could buy that book online as the catalog of the exhibition. It was a very complicated and ambitious project. Another year, people decided they just wanted a very shallow alcove in the space, and not not to fill up a 20 by 25 space, and created a grid of screens that each screen belonging to a particular grad. And I will scrub forward on this one as well to the point where they restart the sequence. The sound has nothing to do with this, by the way. Everybody would put an object that represented their thesis, that was a kind of metaphor for their thesis, onto screen, then a number that tracked to their name and their abstract, which was in a takeaway multiple. And then a syncopated turning of pages through their various work. All of this was created obviously as separate videos using a metronome. So it was kind of an orchestration of many things. I think it will zoom in here now. All right. Yeah, okay. So this website obviously reflected that same idea, with the possibility of clicking on a particular person, in this case, Ramike Forbes, to go into their abstract and ultimately to link to more of their work. And Ramike, by the way, since people often ask, where are people today? Ramike is the creative director for Jacobin Magazine in New York City. Another year was a year where they just said, we're going to forego showing any work, and each of us are just going to create a glyph that represents our thesis. And then they created a central plinth that situated their curatorial text. They all wrapped their individual thesis books to sort of fit into that statement and then refit into that statement. And their website was the place where you could really dig in and look at the work they'd done. It was called In the Bag. And they had a little swag bag that had their abstracts in it, you know, a squeezy ball, a pen, I don't know, a t-shirt, something. So each of these is solving the problem of the exhibition in a way that's really unique to that particular cohort. Like I said, graduation does eventually come, and it's an incredibly happy moment, and it often happens back into that space. This past spring's theme, also ambitious, was called Working Hours. All of those are actually working clocks for each of the grads, and there was a timestamp, a sort of labor timestamp clock, which was worked into their theme. On the back of that title wall, it just showed a lot of process work that represented all the labor that goes into just coming up with the final idea. The final work was displayed around the space, and in the middle was a circular arrangement of everyone's thesis books, which you could really linger over. And in the middle of it all was the spinning circle of death, which actually did spin. They put it on a little turntable, and this was the same class that had used this motif on their atlas cover, so it was kind of full circle. No pun intended. Yeah, so this is the website from this past year, which was coded and designed by 2 graphic design grads. Every year, Mark Moscone, who runs the exhibitions, comes to me looking for nominations for who might take on the identity of the entire show, and how that plays out through all kinds of different pieces. So Zach and Serena did this year and did a great job. So 2019 was the last year we had a dedicated GD only website. Then 2020 was when the museum began to take on the task of hosting the web representation of the entire MFA show, and of which each discipline gets its own site. So all of these have been designed by our graphic design grads, and are all there for you to go and explore. It's really a great way to see a lot of different work. That is for sure. And that's something I would recommend everybody does about any program that you're looking into, is really look to see what the work is like. So finally, 2 bound copies of the thesis book are required as a repository for the final body of thesis work, and copies of the past thesis books are in the RISD Fleet Library. Many are on the shelves. Some of them are in special collections. Behind me here are at least some of well, I'm sitting in the midst of my office, which has all of the graphic design thesis books for people to come and look at. And they're quite incredible. They were on view at a graphic design triennial, which is up at Woodsbury Gallery, which is where Molly's office is. It's a wonderful gallery space. And in this particular case, we laid out a bunch of these thesis books for people to really appreciate. And this was Vi Mahendran's book called Ethnographemes, which, this is a case of the library project where she chose a book about ornament, sort of initiating a whole bunch of study about language systems and synesthesia in this case. This was coded to actually be an active font. This dealt with sound. The good news is that almost all of the recent theses are viewable in digital form at digitalcommons.risd.edu. And this is sort of, I just want to show you the interface so that you know that you go in and search for graphic design, master's theses, and then you can put in the year and look at the results of that. Or you can just, noodle around at all of them. But these are downloadable PDFs of the thesis books where you can really get a sense of what goes into a thesis at RISD. Finally, RISD GD MFA alumni are everywhere and they keep in touch with each other. So talk to them. Talk to them about their experience here, about how they handled it financially, where they're working, what they're doing. This was the beginning of a little evening gathering after the New York Art Book Fair in New York. And all of the people in this picture come from different MFA classes. So it's not like all the people from one class are getting together. It's like many, many different years are represented here. So as I said, the MFA exhibition websites are all viewable online with links to the individual years. You can go back and capture those in this talk. And again, the alumni are everywhere and they can tell you about their experience here in the grad program. So just reach out to them. They can also talk about, applying to multiple programs and how they made their decisions. So be sure also to check out our department website, gd.risd, which keeps up to date with what's going on here. And thank you. And I think that there are questions after this, right, Molly?
Yeah, I answered the majority of them were portfolio questions that I answered, but a lot of them had the same themes. So you should be able to see those answered questions, everybody who, if you do have portfolio questions. But if you have any other questions, I see one here that we'll talk about, but put them in the Q&A and we'll go through up until 2 p.m. So first one is, what are some of the resources that students have available to them when printing and constructing thesis books? Do some folks print and bind books themselves, or do people send their books off to print?
Well, there is a very specific question. We have many ways to print things on campus. Here in the grad studio, we have a color laser printer, which we've managed to secure free printing. It's not meant to edition thesis books on. It sometimes happens. But most people are interested in the whole process of getting a professionally printed book and deal with Mixam, which is a very good online printer. Lulu used to be the go-to, or Blur, but Mixam seems to have taken hold. Yeah, some people will combine a print-on-demand thing with another section of their book printed on special paper, which they can do here, and then they will bind it themselves. I mean, please come visit and I can show you examples of all these things, because that could be a whole other talk about approaches to that design problem. And like the exhibition, it's always the same design problem. but the way that people solve it so differently is, I think, one of the beautiful things about our particular program.
Yeah, and it's hard to say like in the beginning too what you'll end up doing, because I feel like the process of the practice will guide you. But yeah, any other questions, put them in the Q&A. Let's see, I answered a couple. Let me see if there are any ones that essentially people wanted to know if if they're if you're reviewing for the 2-year, are they also going to be considered for the 3-year if they're not ready? I answered yes to that question.
Be sure to mark that on your, be sure to make that explicit, okay, in your materials when you apply. Molly, do they have 2 boxes they can mark?
Essentially, they have to choose one. I usually guide students to choose the one that's most applicable. But if you're reviewing a 3-year student who clearly has the background for a 2-year program, then you would actually have to have a conversation to find out, well, why is it that you want an extra year? We don't think you need it necessarily, right? And it's the portfolio that would get you there in the first place. But I typically advise students, if you don't have a traditional background in graphic design educationally, then you'll want to apply to the 3-year program. Or if you've been just working for years in the field and don't have that a fine arts background at all, so there are different scenarios where the 3-year program makes sense. The 2-year program really is pretty straightforward, with a bachelor's degree in graphic design, having that background, and then also having some work on top of that. And
I want to expand on that, just because there are so many different programs out there now that are a BFA or a BA in visual communication, or in advertising design, or in data visualization, or in interactive, blah.
Yeah.
And really where the distinction is, to me, is how robust that undergrad education was in typography, in a situated knowledge of the history of graphic design and graphic design practice, not just one piece of it, because so much of undergrad education has become very specialized and geared towards the job market, right? So
how many more names of one thing can we come up with?
Yeah, well, so somebody might come to the 2-year program and get here and go, oh my God, I have no idea.
Right.
I only have used this one font because I only make online UI stuff, right? I don't have any idea about what you're talking about when we're talking about more, let's call them deeper structures, deeper typographic structures, or how language and typography come together. So really give that some thought, but also be explicit about it in your statement of purpose, which is
that's your opportunity. That's the opportunity to express how effectively you can communicate. First of all, this is a communications, how well can you effectively communicate, but also like, why is it that you're applying to this program, this track at RISD at this time in your life? So I really think about it as like a future.
I'm hanging up now. You go.
You know what I mean? It's just, I really, really do. But you're absolutely right, Bethany. It's I can guarantee you that you are going to get an extremely thorough review of your work, because Bethany is very good at what she does. So
I am, and I'm invested in it, because you are the people I'm going to be spending 2 and 3 years of my life with. So why would I not take it seriously? That's a really important thing to talk about too. It's like, as you are comparing different programs, really vibe them out, meet the people there, check out the space, see who you'll be studying with, and talk to the students who are there and who have been there. It's a huge piece of this.
We have a couple more questions that have just come in, actually quite a few more. So this one I believe we addressed already. Does the graduate program in graphic design encourage cross-pollination with other majors? Is it possible to take classes outside of GDA? I think we discussed the opportunities for that during winter session. We do have electives, but again, your time here is very precious, right? So what is it that you need to progress your practice, etc.?
And this points to academic advising. So it's like, if you want to throw pots, I'm going to be the person who says, now you have this many credits leading to graduate. You know, how many of those credits do you want to spend just having fun, you know, or and getting your hands dirty, or does this have some sort of integral thing with the fact that you're interested in three-dimensional, you know,
Right.
or
Right.
variability over form, right? I mean, there's many ways to talk about it, but to come at it with a sense of purpose, because the time goes really fast here. In grad
Exactly.
school is the sliver, even though it's a mountain you see ahead of you. Once you get there, you're like, now we can see everything
Yeah.
and going down the hill, you know, it goes fast.
You just got to go with it. Jump in two head first, 2 feet, whatever you say.
But yes, you can, and you can take courses across disciplines. Sometimes things are cross-listed. Sometimes it's just a matter of open seats in different things. But like some of the grads are taking a UI course that's offered by Industrial Design. You might meet somebody down in the co-works maker space who's from furniture design, and you realize that you want to collaborate on something. So there's many ways to make it happen, structurally, but also informally.
Yeah. Let's see. This question is there an expectation that students entering the program will know the kinds of subjects and themes they would like to explore beforehand? Or is there room to explore topics and themes that folks might be interested in during the program? That's a good question. We get this one a lot.
No, it's a really good question, because I'm frankly suspicious of somebody who says, I know exactly what my thesis is going to be, and
Right.
I'm ready to start. When so much happens, our job here is to provide you encounters with content, processes, other minds, your cohort that will influence and expand, you know, your already somewhat instinctual desire to go to grad school. Everybody's got their thesis in them somewhere, but it's really our job to sort of like, you know, draw it out and usher it forward. And it may be a surprise to you. It may be things that you and this is where I say it's about persistent ideas. It might be about something that comes out of the Atlas project where you're just like, I had no idea that that would lead to this other place. So
I mean, the idea is to
we're
progress, right?
yeah, and to keep really open and to make this additive rather than summative experience, right? You're not just coming to do this thing that's a capstone project that proves something and gives you a degree. It really is, it's meant to inquire and explore and expand, I think.
Yeah.
And it's much less about teaching you what to think than how to think. Right?
Yes. I love that.
So,
So we have a lot more questions here, but the thing
go for it.
if you guys feel like I am gonna skip over a couple that we've already done. So you can always email me at admissions@risd.edu. I'll put that in the chat there for you. I really want to get after some questions that we haven't addressed yet.
Okay.
So this one is, I understand that there are not any prerequisites for this program, as in industry experience, but they're interested to know if prior industry experience does interact, or make an impact on decision-making for you guys.
Oh yeah, no, it's part of the rich medley of characters that we get here, is that actually the rarity is somebody coming straight out of a BFA program and directly into graphic design. We much prefer people to have had at least a year of some kind of professional practice out in the world. It could be that you got your BFA in graphic design and went and worked for an NGO or something, and you were just an ancillary member of a team. But you know, industry experience is a wonderful thing to bring with you and contribute here. And many of the 2-year people in our current incoming fall class, you know, they were working at high-powered jobs and wanted to just kind of recalibrate. They wanted to stop the forward momentum and say, do I always want to be, you know, pegged with doing this thing, or is there something I can learn in grad school? So it's a plus. It's an added value, let's say, to have industry experience, because it brings a sense of context and you know, so-called real life to what are otherwise kind of rhetorically framed projects here. We're not asking you to do a brand campaign for, you know, a line of coffee, or something like that. But
Right.
we'll give a project that sort of points at identity design through other channels that you can learn something through that about yourself and take back into that world.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm just sending, someone asked a financial aid question. We're gonna have a financial aid session tomorrow.
And answer
With
those.
financial aid. So we'll answer all of those questions. So sign up for that. I'll put the link here in chat too. Sign up for as many sessions as you like. We try not to overlap too much so you guys can attend the things that you want. Most of them are recorded, like this one today. So no worries if you can't make it. So you can always request the recording at admissions.risd.edu. I'll just put that in the chat now before I forget. So let's see. When you talk about a writing example, what are you looking for in the application? So what's required is a statement of purpose, right? And a writing example is not required for graphic design, but if you wanted to submit one, I suppose you could.
It is the writing example. The statement is the writing example.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
It is just what it says it is. It's a statement of intent. Here's my reasons for coming to graduate school, and how I see language serving, look at me, I have no language to talk about.
No words left. Yeah.
No, I mean, it is like, it's how we know what you're looking for, what you're thinking about, who you are, what you're interested in, where you're coming from, where you're hoping to possibly point yourself. Although we don't want to hear that you want to go off and be a creative director of your own studio as an outcome of this, because we can't guarantee that, right? So
Right,
it's not
that's
about
not a vocation.
that so much.
Yeah, this isn't like
It's like I'm practicing in the commercial sphere, and I'm finding it a dead end, and I know there's more to this, blah blah blah, right? Or
Yeah.
I'm coming from a photography background, and I'm also, like in my case, I came from printmaking and poetry workshop, right? What do those have in common? How can I forge those and galvanize those into something that has to do with multiples, has to do with language, has to do with typography? So it's just like, how do you think, and what are you interested in continuing to think about, I think?
Yeah. Definitely. Now this question is more of like could you elaborate? It seems like collaboration is at the core of the student experience and graphic design program here. I was wondering if you see that extending to faculty as well. You already covered some examples in your presentation, but wondering if you could speak to it a bit more. Thanks.
Well, one example of that, well, first of all, collaboration is, again, added value. I mean, it's something, it's cooperation and then occasional collaboration, right? So it's like the studio cohort is in an open space floor right out here. I can hear them. And they are constantly trading ideas and so forth, and they may decide to full on collaborate on something, but most of all, it's cooperation, right? The faculty, in the grad program, I have set it up deliberately so that we co-teach, so that you get like a class of 15 people has 2 faculty members, so that you get a combination of one-on-one time that gives 7 or 8 students to an individual, plus the full class time, plus small groups, plus 2 different points of view, not always in agreement, but it's all meant to sort of like feed the richness of everything here. So faculty are always collaborating here on what the course is going to be, what the courses are. The same is true in the undergrad area. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
And some faculty actually do collaborate on projects together, but
Yeah, and then there are collaborative courses too. I mean, there are just some natural things that happen between faculty in different departments as well, based on what they're working on. I think about the Hyundai project being one of them, our partnership, right?
Yeah, the Hyundai.
So there are larger sort of things going on other than just the department.
Right.
And then the next question is about internship opportunities. We literally just had a session with the Career Center go to careercenter.risd.edu, and that should give you pretty much anything that you would need in terms of what opportunities exist out there. But as Bethany said, joining these alumni groups, that is a very good way to make those alignments where you want to see yourself, trying different things out. But the Career Center is a good place to start, at least.
Yeah, the Career Center is actually has a set of listings. And one of the recent MFAs happened to check the listings and ended up snagging the job of doing all of the digital and the graphic online stuff for the new Brown University Performing Arts Center, the Lindemann Performing Arts Center. I'm like, you found that on the job board? I mean, that's the kind of thing where you bring all of your resources to bear on that. You ask people, you go to the internship meetings at the Career Center, you look at their listings and you talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, we're already starting to have those conversations with the people who are about to graduate. I'm just like, where do you want to point yourself? The more you can start to do that research yourself, the more that we can help.
Yeah, the next question is about displaying industry work versus your own work in a portfolio, and how do you sort of show that one is one and one is the other. So take away your table of contents, take away all your formatting jazz, and really just give us some context and give credit where credit is due inside the description area of Slide Room. Because you can, and if you submit multiple page PDFs, and so we see 75 pages per project, you clearly did not curate. What we want to see is something that's really curated, something that you have actually thought about and done. This is a very competitive program, so you want to make sure that it's challenging for a reason, right? It's hard to pick which pieces of which project, and that's what the challenge is there for.
Can I address this only because you touch on some things that every admissions cycle I just go, oh. And one of them is that you have 20 or 25 pieces of work, and instead of 25 pieces of work, it's 25 opening pages of multi-page PDFs. Please don't do that. All right. Please don't do that. You have a single frame, and then you have the caption area where you can really tell us what we're seeing or what you want us to see. If it is industry and it's like a gigantic branding project, let us know what your role was in the team. It's also a place to put links to longer forms of what you're showing, so you don't have to show everything. So no multi-page PDFs, but the other thing is, do not use a single slide to mortise together 25 million pictures.
Yeah.
Don't
I mean,
do
we'll accept like maybe two to four, but that's because we really can't zoom.
I mean,
so,
you can't enlarge in Slide Room in such a way that you can see what's going on. So like people often say, well, I did a book that's like 250 pages. How am I going to show that? You could show 4 representative spreads or something on one slide and give me a link to a PDF of the, if I'm curious, I can go to the longer thing. So, but
I also
talk about the work in the caption, because that's really also tells us a lot about how you would involve yourself in describing your work during your time here, which is a lot of the time is spent talking with each other, amongst each other, in these kind of critical dialogues where we're showing work or having class together.
Think about context though. Like, how do you want this to be viewed or experienced? And so maybe a still image isn't the best way to go about that. Maybe you need to do a GIF. Maybe it needs to be a time lapse. Maybe it needs to be a movie. So really thinking about formatting issues and what's the best way to show this book or thing, or so I put slideroom.com. Just go slideroom.com, search on their website for formatting. They'll give you all the straightforward answers that you need. And I completely come to one of our portfolio tip sessions. We basically say, do this and don't do that. And we're very transparent about it. So I want to help you guys out as best as we can.
Make it sound like we're a little bossy. Like we're a little bossy.
We are a little bit bossy, but you know what? It's a great program. So what the heck?
Well, here's the deal. I mean, everybody who's listening should know that there's like 300 applicants for 16 positions, okay?
Yeah.
It's we look at the and we look at everything. We look at the portfolios, we read the statements, we look at your transcripts, we read your letters of recommendation, right? And we have to make cuts along the way because we don't have enough space to invite everyone. So it's hard. And so it's sort of your first design problem is to sequence that portfolio. You know, if you did make a feature length film, show us a clip, show us a 2-minute clip, not a 30-minute video.
Right.
So just like, how do you edit? How do you shape? How do you represent yourself?
Yep. And that's a wonderful way to end it, because that's the problem that they all have to try to solve right now. That's what they should be thinking about. But first you have to apply so that you can really get in there and see the problem, like see the things that you have to resolve. So get in there and start your application. I always say there's no benefit to applying early, except that you'll know what you have to do to get your portfolio ready for slide room, right? It's really just to give you some time, some advantage to not freak out at the last minute. Give yourself some grace.
A few postscripts. I know a lot of people will apply to every program and not give it much thought. I'm going to urge you to give it thought now. And really be smart shoppers about where you think you might belong. Because you don't want to get to a point where you get admitted to all of them and suddenly have to make decisions. I mean, that sounds like it might be dreamy. It's actually a nightmare.
Yeah.
I went through that myself where I was like, Yale and RISD, you know, I got into both of them and I nearly had a nervous breakdown trying to figure out where to go. And I went to RISD, by the way. But in any case, also get your money together. Really take a hard look at the finances and know that we are not a gigantic research university that has endless buckets of money where they can move things around. We don't have the CIA development on campus. We don't have, you know, military research happening. We can't move money.
We have NASA sometimes, but you know, they're not also shelling out a ton of money.
Yeah, but we're dealing with,
that's a good point.
With zero gravity ergonomics. We're not dealing with money makers. But in any case, these are my old person wisdom words, is really vibe it out, meet the people, go to the place, and take a good look at how you will carve that 2 or 3 years into a time where you're not going to be stressed the entire time around money.
I completely agree. Come to the session tomorrow. We are extremely transparent about what it costs to come here, how grad students afford it, and how, you know, they have to take out loans occasionally. What we do give out for financial aid to both domestic and international students. Absolutely have to come to that session tomorrow. I already put the link in there. We're over time. Bethany, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was so great. It's recorded again. So if you want a recording, just email us at admissions and we'll send it over to you. And everybody have a good night.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye.